Chipper, first of all, as a switch hitter, how would you describe what your philosophy was at the plate that made you a success?
I think trying to keep things as simple as possible, not trying to overthink things. I had pretty much had the same approach from both sides of the plate. Hit the ball through the wall, not over the wall. You know, drive the ball into the gaps, create backspin, and you know, as I got older, bigger, stronger, you know, those balls that were in the gaps for doubles and triples started carrying out of the ballpark. And but it's you know, being a switch hitter is twice as much work. You know, I mean, you have to try and keep both of those swings on the same plane as much as you can, on par as much as you can, because I just can't tell you how many times during the course of the year, you know, I feel great right-handed, not so good left-handed, and then you'll put in so much work to try and, you know, get the left-handed swing back to where it's supposed to be, that the right-handed swing falls off. And you literally go through maybe a month during the course of the season where you got, you know, both swings right here, and it doesn't matter who's out there, righty, lefty, you're gonna hit the ball hard somewhere.
That's really interesting. I don't think many people think about that, the twice as much work that you described. Why do you think so few have succeeded? You know, there's not too many in the category of Eddie Murray, Mickey Mantle, Chipper Jones.
Well, I don't know how many guys are willing to put in that much time and effort to do it. It takes a ton of effort to be a major league hitter on one side of the plate. To be able to do it on two sides of the plate, first of all, you have to have a lot of God-given ability, but you have to take it a lot further than that. And Frank Howard, one of my early hitting instructors in the Braves organization, whenever I would come into the batting cage in the mornings, he'd say, we're taking 150 swings. You know, you're going to take 50 right-handed, you're going to take 100 left-handed. We're going to get that left-handed swing up to where your right-handed swing is. And that was the mentality I had from day one once I got to the Braves organization.
Frank was a big man. He was a hard guy to argue with.
Yeah, you didn't really tell him no.
How would you describe what you think earned you this honor?
Well, I think the switch hitting is definitely, I think I would have been a big leaguer had I not been a switch hitter and just strictly been right-handed. But the reason I'm sitting here today is because I'm a switch hitter. It puts me in a different category than everybody else. You know, that switch hitting fraternity, along with the third base fraternity, they're both very small fraternities. And I think the fact that I was a member of both and did it for as long as I did is certainly the reason that I'm sitting here today.
What do you think your emotions will be the first time you see your plaque in that gallery here in Cooperstown?
Chill bumps on chill bumps. You know, if we walked through the gallery yesterday with my dad, my mom, my kids, and my dad walked up to Mickey Mantle's plaque, and he touched it, and he had to turn away. He was welling up with tears. I mean, so if he gets that choked up for Mickey Mantle, what do you think it's going to be when he goes up and puts his hand on his son's plaque? I think I'll probably well up with tears, you know, watching that happen. But I think every time, you know, we talk about induction, we talk about the plaque going up, it's almost as though I'm flashed right back to my to my childhood in the backyard, all those days of imitating Dodger lineups, imitating Baltimore Oriole lineups, and really, you know, that's where the switch hitting seed was planted and began to blossom, you know, and every time we talk about Mickey Mantle, I always harken back to when I was 7, 8 years old in the backyard.
How so?
It's just, he's the reason I was a switch hitter. He was my dad's idol. Dad always talked about him, you know, so much. I never got to see him play, but he's probably the single biggest reason why I'm in Cooperstown. You know, if he hadn't have impressed upon my dad how important it was to be a switch hitter, I wouldn't be sitting here. So if he's looking down, I would love to tell him that he's the main reason why I'm going to be a Hall of Famer.
Now, as we were speaking before this interview, talking about how many Braves are here in the hall with you, from the manager to your teammates, especially the pitching teammates.
Mm-hmm.
How did the culture of excellence of the Braves affect who you became as a player?
Well, I think that's a trickle-down effect from general manager to manager to the veteran guys on the ball club, kind of making an impression on me. I was the young, flashy punk kid, that cocky, a little mouthy from time to time, and there were many times that Bobby and Glav, Maddox, Smoltzy, Terry Pendleton, Fred McGriff, guys like that had to pull me aside and say, look, this is the way we do it. They're not going to try and change me per se, but let's tone it down a little bit. We're professional here. It's a long season. We need to be a little more even keeled. And they saw me going, through the highs and lows and really not being that consistent person every single day. And so there were a bunch of times I got called into the principal's office and was told to settle down a little bit. And the gradual change happens, and all of a sudden, when the Jeff Francoeurs and the Brian McCanns and the baby Braves of the early 2000s started coming along, I looked in the mirror, and all of a sudden I saw Glav, Smoltz, Maddox, TP, looking back at me in the mirror, and that's who I tried to be to those guys. So it was a gradual passing of the torch right on down the line.
You described yourself as a young punk.
Mm-hmm.
So in a nutshell, what was the transformation? Who were you at the beginning, and who did you become?
Well, I think through a bunch of trials and tribulations off the field, obviously you're going to go through the peaks and valleys on the field. I realized that I couldn't continue to go to the extremes, the high extremes, the low extremes. Just take it as it comes, stay even keeled, and be consistent. Took me becoming consistent off the field before I could become emotionally consistent on the field. Going through a couple divorces, having it be as public as it was, those things kind of humbled me, a little bit, to the point where I would kind of shy away from attention. I would shy away from the media and whatnot, and people saw that, and while that wasn't particularly me, there were some things that I had to iron out personally before I could open up about them.
You come to the Hall of Fame with your wife,
Mm-hmm.
and she's in a special situation.
Mm-hmm.
You're both in a special situation. Not everybody knows
Mm-hmm.
what is happening this weekend on the calendar, at least.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly is your situation, and how will that affect your approach to Induction Sunday?
Yeah, if you want to talk about nerve-wracking, my induction is Sunday, and my wife is due with our 7th boy on Monday. So I tried to get her to stay home because I was nervous about everything that's going to be going on here to begin with, and I just I was nervous about her traveling up here, certainly nervous about her traveling back. Hopefully little Cooper decides that he wants to be a couple days late and waits till we get back to Atlanta. But yeah, to say that I'm going to be nervous about the speech is one thing, but being nervous about your wife, going into labor on Induction Sunday, that's a whole different kind of nervous. So we've got our hand signals kind of down right now. So if she, I believe I'm going first in the rotation. So they're going to try and get me up there and get me off and hopefully get her into a nice cool spot so that we don't induce labor any sooner than needs to be. So it's nerve-wracking to say the least this weekend.
The name Cooper, how did the two of you come up with that?
Her idea. Oddly enough, we were trying to come up with names, and like I said, we got 7 boys. This will be 7, so we're running out of names. And it was her idea. She said, I'd love to name him something that would commemorate, this summer and this honor, and it's been such a great summer. She goes, I think Cooper's a great name, and I was like, you nailed it, and so Cooper it is.
So just to clarify, 7 boys between you, not all together.
Correct. This will be our second together. Yeah.
And she has another son?
Yep, I have a stepson, and I have 4 boys.
Great. And you're quite famous for another name in your family, the name of another son. If you can, tell me that name and how that name came to pass.
Yeah, my third son, his name is Shea, and he's named after Shea Stadium. Just one of my favorite places to be on the planet. Loved hitting in Shea Stadium. But I played against a guy named Shea Hillenbrand, and I always just loved that name. And it wouldn't have mattered if Shea was a boy or a girl; it was going to be Shea regardless. I often tell, I think his brothers are sometimes resentful of the amount of attention that he gets because he's named after Shea Stadium. Whenever we go to New York, and I have my boys with me, we get out of the car, and everybody always asks, which one's Shea? Which one's Shea? And for him to be, that famous in such a big city, his other brothers kind of resentful of that. But he handles it with grace, and every time, we were walking through the Hall of Fame and yesterday, and they have an exhibit where all the stadiums are, and he walked right over to Shea Stadium. He knows exactly. Still got 2 seats in his bedroom from Shea Stadium, orange seats from Shea Stadium, so he eats it up.
And what does that signify in terms of your relationship with Mets fans and your performance at Shea Stadium?
I think my relationship with New Yorkers in general has evolved over the years. I went from that young, cocky punk that I used to be back in the mid 90s. I was public enemy number 1, when we went up there. And I think it gradually changed. I think I was still public enemy number 1 between the lines, but they saw, that young kid kind of growing up a little bit. And while, it was still my job to go out there and wreak havoc and pain on Mets fans, they began to respect, I think, the man that I grew up to be. And they saw that maturation not only on the baseball field and, being a lot less chirpy and giving respect to, Mets teams, to Mets fans through the media, but also getting out. I used to, whenever I go to New York, I'd barricade myself in my hotel room. Late in my career, last 5, 6, 7 years, man, I would go out and I'd have lunch, out in the city. I'd walk down the street, and there's always people following us wanting autographs and whatnot, but engaging them and interacting with them. People saw that I was making an effort to grow up, and I think by the end, one of my dad's favorite signs was at Citi Field, my last game at Citi Field, and this guy held up the sign and it said, Larry, and then underneath it said, always said with respect, and I get chill bumps, thinking about that, and that was my dad's favorite sign that he saw when I was coming down to the end.
And how would you describe your rate of success against the Mets?
It was just one of those things. I mean, it seemed like whenever we played the Mets, I was seeing the ball really good. I was hot. Whatever big at bat during the course of a game in New York, I was at the plate, and it just seemed like more times than not I came through. I certainly would have hated me too if I was a Mets fan because, there were various times where I get a base hit, be standing on second to, and I'd drive in the go-ahead run in the 8th or 9th inning or whatnot, and I'd be like, I can't believe the rate at which, I'm getting the big hit, in pretty much every game that we play against them. And when you see 7, 8, 9-year-old kids, boo, and saying whatever to an opposing athlete, it's bad because people are going home and telling their kids, you don't cheer for this guy, you boo him, you stick your tongue out, you do whatever you can to get up under his skin. So I always thought that was funny when the young kids I'd be announced, and the TBS cameras would pan over to a certain section of fans, and you'd see the 6-year-olds just going, boo. That always warmed my heart.
I can imagine. Now, is there anything about your career that we haven't touched on that you'd like to add as you consider what's going on this weekend?
I think everything's been, so well documented. We can sit here and we can talk about this is a team game, and you put the team's goals first. I'm so proud of what my organization accomplished through the years, whether it's the World Series championship or the 14 straight division championships. I just tried to go out there and be 1/9 of the equation every single night that helped us win a ball game. If I get about 7 or 8 chances during the course of the game to directly affect the outcome of that game. My 4 or 5 at-bats, up at the plate, my 3 or 4 plays out in the field, if I do them flawlessly, then I've done my job to help us win the ball game. And you do that night after night after night, and you stay focused on doing that night after night after night. At the end of the season, you don't have to worry about the numbers. They're going to be there. We only got it done once. It's one more time than a lot of other teams, so we'll be happy with the one that we got. And we obviously did things pretty well because we got a pretty good contingent up here in Cooperstown. I'm very proud of that.
And a lot of National League titles.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I mean, Jim Kelly succeeded pretty well without winning a Super Bowl. 4 Super Bowls appeared in. Marv Levy and that whole group. So, you have to get there to even be in the conversation, as the saying goes. I mentioned to you that there are some topics about today's game. When you see all the defensive shifts and hear the commissioner talk about maybe implementing a rule to prevent it, what goes through your mind?
Not a huge fan of it. I think the game, we're tinkering with the game a little too much as it is. It's a free enterprise. You put those 7 guys out there behind the pitcher wherever you want, I would have welcomed a shift because I would have inside-outed the heck out of everything. I would have eaten that shift up. I think it takes a conscious effort by hitters to be able to make the adjustment. Other teams are saying, okay, we think that you pull on the ground, you hit the ball in the air the other way. So we're going to play everybody on the right side. All it takes is a conscious effort to go out and work on driving the ball through the shortstop, driving the ball, down the foul line, in left field, and you'll get them out of that shift. So it's free enterprise. I think you should be allowed to play those 7 guys wherever you want to.
Are you a fan of the shifts themselves?
I don't mind it. It doesn't bother me in the least. I think having played some shifts throughout the years against Ryan Howard, who is in our division, or Barry Bonds, I always enjoy getting to play shortstop again. So I thought it was pretty fun when we got a chance to turn double play.
Now, what about the idea of a 20-second clock, which the commissioner has mentioned he'd like to see implemented perhaps as early as next year?
That I don't mind. I think you can there are various ways to speed up the game. Obviously, you have only a certain amount of times you can go out to the mound. I think that's good, but I think ultimately promoting that pitcher or encouraging that pitcher to get the ball and get up on the rubber and go is a good thing because it promotes that guy kind of getting into a rhythm. You go and you catch the ball and you walk around the mound, you go to the rising bag, you throw it around, it's 45 seconds. It's hard to get into a rhythm that way. Most guys will tell you if they catch it and get back on the rubber and get the sign and go, that's when you kind of you get into one of those good ruts, those good rhythms where you do some good things.
Now, you mentioned Barry Bonds earlier. He and Roger Clemens, two of the greats from both sides, offense and pitching, are not in the Hall of Fame. What do you make of their candidacies?
Well, that's the $1 million question. I mean, I think you see them slowly kind of trending up. I'll say this about Barry and Roger. Barry, and I'll say it till the day I die, is the best baseball player I've ever seen don a uniform. Roger Clemens was one of the toughest guys just to put in play, much less get a base hit or hit a home run off of. I can remember many times off of Roger, going 6, 7, 8 pitches deep into an at bat, and me grounding out the shortstop, coming back and just be dripping with sweat. Guys on the bench would ask me, "Are you all right?" I was like, "Man, I just worked my butt off to ground out the shortstop off that." That's how good they were. It's not up to me. It's up to the baseball writers to decide where they are on the whole steroid thing. It's unfortunate that two of the best players of our era had that cloud kind of hanging over their head, where people have their opinions one way or the other. It's just a matter of whether they can get over that 75% plateau of people that are willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. And, we'll see going forward. It's kind of a gray area, I guess you could say, but only time will tell. They've only got another, I think, 4 or 5 years on the ballot, so we'll see in the years to come.
Barry, of course, surpassed Hank Aaron's record for career home runs, all-time great Brave in Milwaukee and Atlanta. Who do you consider to be the all-time career home run?
That's a tough one for me, because I am a Brave, and it's hard to I hold Hank Aaron in such high regard. He's number one. He's the Brave as far as I'm concerned. He will always be the home run king in my book. But like I said, Barry is the best baseball player I've ever seen. That cloud over him, I think, kind of tarnishes that a little bit, but he's got the most home runs in history, so I guess we have to count him as the king.
Oh, you clarified, because I was going to ask you. You said for you.
Yeah, I got 2 home run kings. Let's put it that way. I got one with the most homers, and one that I'm biased about, being the hometown home run king.
Oh, that makes perfect sense, because there are so many conflicts about this. You were describing Barry Bonds as the best ball player you've seen. What were the particular elements that made him, when you watched him, that made him that guy?
It's the sum of the parts. It's the sum of the parts. I mean, he could dominate a game in every facet. He robbed me of a grand slam in Candlestick Park one time, so he was a Gold Glove outfielder. Not the cannon for an arm, but still a very, very good arm. You didn't run on him, let's put it that way. Obviously one of the greatest hitters I've ever seen. Never seen a guy who could walk 200 times. Guys just wouldn't pitch to him. He might get 1 pitch a night to hit, and he did not miss it. Not only did he not miss it, he hit it into another county, most of the time. And a lot of people, what gets overlooked is his ability to run the bases, the stolen bases. I mean, early on in his career was when he did most of his damage, but if you walked him, it was like throwing him a double, because he was a very good, very smart base runner and base stealer. And, it was kind of a catch-22. Do you want to give up, a 4-base hit, or do you want to have him standing on second after, a walk and a stolen base? Most of the time it was Bobby chose the walk and the stolen base, as opposed to him hitting something in McCovey Cove.
And you don't see too many guys walked with the bases loaded.
Exactly.
as he was. What about his personality, and how do you think that affected his perception?
It's tough to say. I wasn't around Barry all that much, so it'd be unfair for me to comment as far as that goes. I don't know what his relationship was like with the media. all I know is, how he treated me and our interactions, and it was always very respectable.
You mentioned earlier, time will tell, 4 or 5 years with the voting. What's your expectation? Do you expect, now that you're a Hall of Famer, to be joined by Barry Bonds?
It'd be hard for me to imagine two of the best players of my era not being in the Hall of Fame. It would be tough for me to imagine that, and it would be, a shame. Whether their candidacy and their Hall of Fame induction or lack thereof is self-inflicted, I don't know. I wasn't there, but it certainly would not be good. If Barry Bonds, the best position player that I've ever seen in my life, and certainly one of the best pitchers in Roger Clemens, we're not here at some point.
Do you wrestle with that at all, or is it only when other people bring it up?
Yeah, I wrestle with it. I mean, it's a slippery slope, but it's something that it's going to have to be addressed at some point. The voters will let you know. I'm so disappointed that the cloud hovering over both of them is even there. They're great players, and they should be here. There's no doubt, but that cloud is preventing them from being here.
Now, when you see Mike Trout play today, what goes through your mind?
The face of baseball. He's Cal Ripken. He's Derek Jeter. He's the guy that I want my young kids to emulate their game after. I mean, that's what he means to the game right now. I don't even think there's a close second, to be honest with you. I mean, he's that good. He's bordering on Barry Bonds' status, getting to the point where teams are not going to let him beat him. He's going to walk 150 times this year, but he's a perennial MVP candidate. I think somebody's going to have to go take it from him if they want to win the American League MVP. It's almost, where Michael Jordan was when he was in his heyday, certainly LeBron. Those guys, game one of every season, they're holding the MVP trophy, and somebody has to come take it from them. That's where Mike Trout is going right now.